Welcome back. So you're here to learn how to reload. Well, first of all, let me give you a little introduction and I'll show you a tour of my loading room, and then we'll get into the basics and tell you exactly what you need to get going. So let's start out with a little bit of a tour. This loading room I built about 3 years ago. It's underneath my new den that I built upstairs. I've got 16.5 feet of cabinet space here, which is really nice. Each of these cabinets I built out of inexpensive poplar and stained them. Poplar is that stuff that when you open up your sock drawer in your dresser, that's poplar. It's a greenish wood. But it's nice for down here. I didn't want to spend super duper money on oak or cherry or anything like that, but it came out good. In this cabinet I've got all my shot shell reloading supplies, shot, wads, all the things that are rather bulky. Here you can see I've got a Mech 600 press. This is actually my third one. I've used them through the years. They're wonderful. This is a cabinet where I store all my reloaded ammunition. And also if I buy any commercial 22s and stuff. This cabinet here I have various, I don't know if I can get by that powder measure, but this cabinet I have various supplies for bullet casting. And I never do any bullet casting in the house. It's a very noxious situation. You don't ever want to cast lead in a living environment. This cabinet is all my bullets and for various calibers, and I have all my books up here, my reference literature. I don't have them all down here right at the moment, but because I like to read them sometimes upstairs. But I have shot shell reloading handbook, cast bullet reloading handbook. I've got some old publications from years gone by and things like that. The next cabinet I've got all my loading dies. I've got loading dies in various turrets that very handy for this turret, single stage turret press. I guess you'd call it a semi-progressive. And here I've got, and there's also up there various powder charging supplies. And here I've got my old-fashioned scale, my Lyman scale that I've used so well for over 40 years. It works fabulously. It never wears out. It's very, very accurate to within 1/10 of a grain or less. And I keep my calipers in there also. And here's where I keep all my powder supplies, various powders for different cartridges. So I got a pretty good supply of whatever I might need for handguns and rifles and shotguns of different needs. Now, going back the other way, and I'll show you this in closer detail later on, but here is a Lee turret press. It's a really great, I love this turret press. It's very handy. You can use it to do semi-progressive loading, or you can do single stage loading. I've got my old Uniflow powder measure by RCBS, and I mounted it on a very sturdy Lyman cast iron base here that gives me plenty of clearance underneath so I don't bang my hand and upset cases. And here, this is all I call this my case preparation area. You know, if you've arrived, you have a case preparation area so that you don't disturb other things. You know, I can sit here and I can trim cases, I can turn cases, I can pop primers with my little dinky C press here that works marvelously also for lubricating bullets. I don't need to have a lot of leverage, although this supplies plenty of leverage, and it's got a good wiggle factor, which is, but for $27 you can't beat that. I recommend it to anybody. And here's my Loadmaster. I use this for loading lots of 223, 45 ACP, 9mm, whatever I have. Anything that I want to shoot 44 Magnum, 44 Special, anything like that, this will handle really nicely. And it's extremely reliable, very fast press. And if you check the prices out, these things are giveaway prices compared to what so many of the so-called progressive presses are. But every time I pull the handle, I get another round. So it's pretty slick, very, very accurate. And so, but along with the length of loading bench, it gives me plenty of room. But let me sit down with you and talk to you for a minute about this whole loading process, okay? You know, there are really two kinds of hand loaders I've discovered through the years. Those that do and those that used to. Have you ever been in somebody's home and they've got the Bowflex sitting in the corner with the clothes draped on it and magazines sitting on it, and the treadmill with the computerized panel and everything that's all covered with stuff that nobody's using anymore? I've seen the same sort of thing go on with hand loading. And it's just one of those things. The first thing I would recommend is that before you invest heavily in reloading, make sure that you understand your own personality. Is this something that you're likely to keep up with? This is not an exercise program. This is something which is, to me, it's a hobby, and to those who enjoy reloading, it's generally a very satisfying and engaging way to keep in touch with your firearms and to be able to shoot more often. Now, not all people really enjoy hand loading. Some of the people who hand load the very most are the people who enjoy it the least. Believe it or not, those who do a lot of trap shooting or skeet shooting or competitive high power rifle shooting and things like that. Many of those people reload simply because it's one of those things that they have to do. It's a necessary evil so that they can keep in the sport and keep their hand in. You know, I knew a fellow years ago that used to load literally, 1,000 rounds of shot shells a week just to keep up his practice at the skeet range. And he loaded in different different bores. He loaded different gauges, right down to 410. Now, he didn't like it in the least. When I remember speaking to him about, I asked him one time years ago, back in the early 70s, I asked him what he would recommend for a loading press. And he said, I don't even bother, He said, unless you really have to. He said, don't do it. He said, it's really boring. Well, and I took his advice with a grain of salt because I knew that I was of a different nature. I enjoy building things. I built these cabinets. Some people would just simply go to Home Depot or the local kitchen store and buy them, and that's fine. But my nature is I like to build things. I like to save money. I'm rather frugal, but I also like to get a little bit more for my money because the hand loader can really not only get more for his money, but he can get better for his money. And that's not necessarily true. Not all hand loaders are engaged in precision loading or in accuracy loading. Though I think that it's an easy enough thing to do. And as we get into the method of loading, and as I go down through all the different processes one by one over the course of several videos, you'll learn how to do these things, and you'll learn how to do it very, very easily. But again, check out, do a self-analysis. If you don't like looking under the hood of your car, if the most you ever do is pour, antifreeze fluid into your windshield washer bucket, if that's the extent of the work you do on your car, or putting the gas nozzle in the side of the car, if that's all you do, you might not be the type of person who's going to be very happy to do reloading, and you might get frustrated at it. A person who uses this machine here can be of two sorts. He can be out of sorts, or he can be in very, very happy condition. I've seen people who absolutely detest this machine because they say that it doesn't work. Well, I know it works. The problem is it's usually the nut behind the wheel, as my friend used to say about people who were in cars. You know, if you don't understand mechanics, if you don't understand leveraging systems, and if you don't understand cams, and if you don't understand basic simple you know, machine concepts and things like that, it is going to frustrate you, and it's not going to work. So, you know, again, investing heavily in something which you're not, that you don't have a natural aptitude for, and that does not, I'm not slighting anybody, because we all have different aptitudes. I'm not a nuclear scientist. You know, I'm not a mathematician. That's not my aptitude. My aptitude is in writing and in teaching and in, you know, mechanical things and that sort. So, but you know, I'm happy to say that what I'm doing is something that gives me great satisfaction and great pleasure. So, but check yourself out. You know thyself. If you're a person who really enjoys working with your hands, if you're a person who enjoys when your wife says that the sink is leaking, if you're the person who enjoys going downstairs and grabbing the toolkit, and you know and you got a plumbing toolkit and you've got a carpentry toolkit, and you're one of these people who's really organized like that, you're gonna love this. You're gonna love this stuff. But if you're the person who has to call his next door neighbor for tools, or if you're the person who you know, has to call the plumber in or something like that because of the dripping faucet, this is not going to appeal to you after a little while. You're going to be very frustrated, and you're going to be very unhappy with the whole thing. There was a gentleman that I saw one day. I suspected that he's probably not doing it any longer. But about 3.5, 4 years ago, I was in the store where, you know, all the reloading stuff was basically starting to get a little bit depleted. This was the beginning of the Obama rush. This was when things were starting to really leave the shelves. Well, he came in, and he had apparently already ordered a whole bulk supply of 223 cases. He had a bag of 500 223 cases. He bought himself 2 big bulk boxes of 223 bullets, and they gave him a big 8-pound canister of CFE 223, which had just come out at the time, and all the primers that he needed. And then he bought himself a big blue Dillon, you know, fully progressive reloader for $750 or whatever it was. So off he went with his parcel of goodies, you know, probably close to $2,000 before he was done. And I doubt that he's doing it any longer, because the simple questions that he was asking about how the machine worked and how, you know, how different things were done, just would not be the sort of questions that a person with any mechanical aptitude would have ever asked. So I suspect that the machine is probably sitting in a corner in his basement. He may have finally loaded up all the rounds that he needed to, and he might be happy, but he may also be the same sort of person who, you know, after a couple of months of shooting, probably turned in his gun at the local store and sold the whole kit and caboodle. So, but know yourself. Ask yourself a few simple, maybe poignant questions. If this is something that your friends have talked you into, you know, a person who really wants to reload doesn't need to be talked into doing something any more than they have to be talked into, you know, playing at golf or going out fishing or whatever. You either like it or you don't like it. So now that we've assigned that task to ourselves, and you come out with a conclusion that you do enjoy it, the next 2 categories of people who load are the reloader and the hand loader. Now these are my 2 terms that was handed on to me by the old timers who used to do this years ago. Reloading is nothing new, believe me. This goes back to sticking a patch and a ball down a barrel. That was hand loading. So they were using nutcracker devices made by Lyman and you know, Ideal back in the turn of the 18th to the 19th to the 20th century. So there's nothing new under the sun. People have been pushing primers into brass cases for a long time, and all the things that the greater sciences have really, you know, the reloading, the reloading gains have really begun around 1949. That seemed to be the big year. That was the year that Hornady and Spear started up together, Joyce Hornady and Vernon Spear, and then they eventually parted company and started two different companies of their own. But you know, you also had Bruce Hodgson starting out with his powder company. You had Bill Ruger starting out with his first automatic pistol, the Ruger Standard. Let's see, you had John Nozzle. Did I mention him? You know, starting out with his petition bullet and everything. So 1949 was like when the great ship landed, and everybody wanted to start getting involved with reloading. Up until that time, you know, reloading was really a pain in the neck. If you wanted to reload, you had to find a source of bullets, which was very difficult. Most of the time, if a guy wanted to actually reload and make his own ammo, he had to find surplus ammo someplace and manufacture his own, pull his own bullets from the cases, and basically start from scratch. Very often he had to take military full metal jacket bullets and cut the tips off and drill holes in them to make his own hollow points and things like that were, you know, very frangible and destructive, and all kind. It was a miserable experience to try to hand load. Most of the companies like Winchester and Remington, Federal, they really held all this component stuff to themselves. They really weren't selling. They weren't in the business of selling their components very infrequently. And it was only once you know, the 50s started rolling along where people could actually get a hold of components on a more regular basis. So, but the reloader is a person who basically remanufactures his own ammunition to supply a need. The person who sits at his mech shot shell reloader and engages himself in just turning out constantly AA wad cups with the same charge of red dot powder, with the same you know, the same primers day after day after day until he exhausts the supply, and then he starts all over again when he gets back from the range. That's a reloader. The person who sits at this machine and just chunks out one 9mm after another, and without regard to whether, in other words, it's just basically to shoot, without regard to any particular precision involved in everything. And I do some of that. You know, some of that's just for fun shooting at you know, bowling pins and stuff like that, and bowling pin matches. I've got a good load that works with different pistols, but basically there's no ultra precision stuff involved with this. It's basically just remanufacturing ammo over and over again. So that's the reloading side of the deal. I don't want to imply that reloading means it's imprecise loading, because reloading is certainly something that should be done with precision and just the same care. But it doesn't necessarily involve some of the higher grade steps that a person can get into, such as neck turning of the brass, you know, all these other things that can be done to help you know, exceed the normal standards of accuracy. Generally, it's a matter of just getting the job done so that you can get back out and do some shooting. The hand loader is a person who is by nature a person who, and he may have done a lot of hand loading until he could find the load that was necessary to do his reloading. You know, sometimes one is hand in glove with the other. You start out doing some precision hand loading, testing and evaluating. A popular term that's used on the internet these days, they reinvented the wheel, it's called ladder tests. You know, it means incremental. We used to do always incremental tests, now it's renamed ladder tests for whatever reason. I haven't got a clue what that really means, you know, going up a rung one at a time. And I'll explain the process of incremental load evaluation as we go on. It's a very simple process that allows a person to discover which particular powder charge with a given bullet and primer in a cartridge will work the very best and give them the most satisfying degree of accuracy. And you know, that can be an endless journey, as it is with me. You know, I'm one of these people who, if I shoot a 3/8 inch group with my 257 Roberts, I say, gee, I wonder if I maybe just try a different powder and start a different testing series, if maybe I'll arrive at a better load. You know, because I'm always just looking at, it's kind of a competitive thing with me. It's just my nature. I want to see if I can arrive at that one wonderful load that I can tell people what my factory 257 Roberts with a standard factory barrel is out shooting the guy beside me that's got a 3/4 inch diameter stainless steel heart barrel or something like that, and I'm out shooting him with my sporter. It's a very satisfying thing. I get a kick out of it, and it's not because he can't shoot better than me. It's just that I'm involving myself with an activity which takes me over the crest of the hill, where he's pretty much satisfied with using factory ammo, perhaps, or maybe somebody is giving him some ammo to shoot, or whatever. But it's all wonderful fun. The precision hand loader is somebody who will do pretty much all the time. It's not so much a matter of how much ammo he gets out. This would have, you know, his eyes would glaze over if he saw one of these. For many years, I loaded most of my life. I loaded one round at a time at a single station H press, a O press, and before that, I loaded. I know, at least according to the number of primers I went through at least 3,000 rounds with an old Lyman Spartan C press, which, you know, it was just a C shape. That was a cast iron press that I used for 3 or 4 years before I finally got an RCBS Rock Chucker O press, and that's what I used up until only about 10 years ago or so. And so that press, that Rock Chucker turned out countless thousands of rounds of, you know, 30-06 and 270, even some 375 H&H Magnum. I don't know how many handgun cartridges through the years. And my wife's 308 and her 270. My brother-in-law coming up with his, rocket ships to reload them and everything. So I had all kinds of dies, and I had all the stuff. And it was just a matter of going up in the afternoon or in the evening or something, and turning out some ammo that I could bring up to the range and do some testing. A lot of the shooting I did was nothing more than casual testing, these so-called ladder tests. I was bringing bringing 4 or 5 different incremental loads up to the range, 4 rounds apiece. It's just a matter of shooting 3 or 4 shots into a piece of paper at a time under the best conditions you can, at a bench, just to see which loads tend to work. So again, we'll get into all the finer details about it, but I only want to address one thing in this particular video, is to once you've determined that this is something you really want to do, or maybe you're really not entirely sure. Most people really won't be sure until they've actually done it for a while, to see just exactly how it's working out for them, or if they're enjoying it. Well, my first recommendation is to get yourself one of these simple $27 presses, and don't let anybody laugh at you, and don't let anybody snicker at you or anything like that. I can guarantee you that I can turn out precision ammo with that press. The only thing that wiggle factor means is that the handle wiggles. It has nothing to do with the accuracy of the die. It has nothing to do with the accuracy of the load. So, and the leverage is there. It's not something you would have a lot of fun with over long period of time. But that $27 press will serve 2 functions. First of all, it'll give you an opportunity to try out loading, and then when you're all done with it, then you can have a case preparation area, and you can startle all your friends with your high grade case preparation area, because believe me, that's something that very few people have. You're not going to be preparing cases in the kitchen. Now, I'm only kidding. If you have nothing more than a simple old desk, I had my first loading bench was a 40-inch wide corner blind cabinet that I got from a cabinet maker years ago. I went in there one day, and I was walking the beat. I went in there one day and I said, do you have anything that, any old stuff that I could use? And he says, I do. He says, as a matter of fact, I built a blind cabinet for the wrong corner. He was building a right, I think he built I had a left-hand corner. He was supposed to build a right-hand corner, so this is basically something he was going to bring to the dump. So he gave it to me for nothing, and I took it home and I mounted a sheet of plywood on it, and I lacquered it up nice, made it nice and smooth, and I mounted my Lyman Spartan press on it. I had my Forster case trimmer mounted on it, and I had the whole thing was set up on a 40-inch wide, just an old kitchen base unit. So you don't need to have much, and I could have done exactly the same thing with an old desk or something like that. So you don't need to have a lot to get started. You can even get a pedestal base or something like that that will work until you can find out whether you like the sport or not. So don't go endeavoring to buy all kinds of junk, and leave your buddy home who's going to tell you you need a case of this and 3 jugs of that, and all these primers. Just start out easy. Buy a couple of sleeves of primers, 100 at a time. I know they're going to tell you, well, they're cheaper by the 1,000. Well, that's all right. You're still going to use them. Buy a couple of 100 primers. Buy a couple of sleeves of primers. That's 10 boxes of ammo right there with 2 sleeves of primers. So you're in pretty good shape. And there's no waste if you can give them away if you're inclined not to do this anymore. Buy a pound of powder. Now, I'll go into all the different things that you absolutely have to have, but you start out easy. Just really don't get too carried away with things at first, and don't be like the person who thinks he wants to take up fly tying, so he goes to the local fishing show, the sportsman show or something, and he buys all these different capes for all the feathers and the hooks, and then he comes home with $350 worth of supplies that sit in a box and turn mildew. So don't be like that. Start out easy. Do a few rounds, get the hang of it, see if you like it. So in the next exciting video, what I'm going to do is I'll start breaking down what you absolutely have to get started with, and then I'll go into the more advanced stuff. Perhaps in the same video, but I'll go into the more advanced stuff for those of you who know that, or maybe you've already gone past the novice stage, and now you want to learn how to really progress in reloading and get it done right. And finally, don't even bother going on the internet and trying to figure out what to do on the basis of what you read in those blogs and on those threads. That'll absolutely get you nowhere. Rule number 1, cardinal rule: never under any circumstances take a load off the web unless it's from published data, off a PDF file or something like that Hodgdon or Spear or Winchester Roland or whoever it is. Make sure that it's from a manufacturer's source. All the different manufacturers will publish reloading data. There are a couple of exceptions, but they still have the manuals. That's cardinal rule number 1. I can't tell you with more emphasis. Reloading is absolutely dangerous. Okay, it's not hazardous. It's dangerous. The only safety is yourself. And that's why it's so dangerous, because if you become a faulty link in this whole thing, you'll blow yourself up. I'll give you a quick story. A friend of mine, an acquaintance of mine, took his son one day. I was going to do some testing of some ammunition, and so he came along. He packed his car full of different guns and stuff, and he brought his 16-year-old son with him. And he wanted to let his son try his .357 Smith & Wesson wheel gun, you know, a nice 600 model. And he was about 75 yards away from me with his son. For some reason, I just turned to look in that direction, just at the same time that his son, who was standing there with his arm extended, pulled the trigger, and I heard an unusual noise. There was no recoil. I didn't see, you know, .357 has got a pretty good recoil. There was absolutely no recoil. It made a very loud but an unusual sound. It sounded more like pap, and it was no bang. And I knew that there was something immediately wrong. By the time I got over there, his son's eyes were streaming with tears. The whole top of the gun was sheared off as if somebody had taken a bandsaw and cut it in two. The middle of the barrel all the way down, the front sight was gone, the whole top of the barrel was gone, the top of the cylinder was gone, the hammer was gone, the whole top of the frame was gone, and the top strap was gone. The cylinder had disintegrated from the center pin upward. I took some of those rounds home, and I pulled the bullets, and I found out that the idiot who was loading for him was remanufacturing ammo, not my acquaintance, but he was buying it from somebody who was remanufacturing ammo, perhaps on some press like this, or maybe I don't know what he was doing. It could have been a Dillon, it could have been anything. But he was remanufacturing ammo, putting it into the white boxes with his own sticker on it and everything. But this idiot was using high-density powder, he was using bullseye powder. Now, bullseye powder it's one of those powders that it will not fill a case up before it blows up. You know, you can quadruple charge a .357 Magnum case with bullseye powder, and you can turn yourself into a real disaster. It turned out that he mixed up bullseye for unique powder. He got his whole thing wrong, and he almost killed that kid. If that kid had been shooting from this position here, it would have wiped him out. It would have, unfortunately, it could possibly have very well killed him. But these are the things that you can't mix up, and this is why hand loading is extremely dangerous. I've never had an issue with it. I've never been once concerned about any safety issues with myself, and I've never once been concerned about the safety issues with the people I've helped get started in it, because you know they started out understanding that it's dangerous and working from there. So basically it's like handling a rattlesnake. You don't ever have to get bit as long as you know that it's a rattlesnake and that he's got teeth on it. As long as you understand, and it's like an electrician working inside of a service panel for 50 years. You know, always in there, he's always working on it, and he never has to worry that he's going to fry himself, because he knows that it's dangerous. He knows that that service panel can immediately turn him into toast if he's not careful. So, but for the person who understands the process, for the person who understands what he's doing, there's no danger involved whatsoever. But I don't want to delude you. It is dangerous, and there are hazards that you have to be very careful that you understand. So we'll talk about all those hazards and those dangers in the upcoming videos. So that's it for now. Take care, and God bless.